Before we get to our interview with Adrian Bozman, we want to thank our sponsor for today, and that is Thirdsy, collagen-based drink powder that helps with joint and connective tissue repair and has ingredients like magnesium, L-theanine, and GABA that are included to help calm your central nervous system and support deep and REM sleep. The stuff tastes great. I look forward to drinking it every night, and it has been an absolute game changer for me when it comes to my sleep. And I have my friend Jason in our 5 a.m. group who was looking to get some supplements. I told him about Thirdsy, and he tried it. He absolutely loved it. I am now sort of like his Thirdsy supplier. Like he orders and uses the code. I'm like his guy. You got to get that Thirdsy. And he was saying that his wife actually is now upset at how deeply he is sleeping because I guess his 3-year-old son woke up one night and was calling for him, and he did not wake up. So
oh my God.
very deeply, and he has been. It's shown because the guy's a savage at the gym. He's like Chad McKay. He is big, moves like flexibility is off the chart, and he is strong as an ox. So
he gets good sleep.
He gets very good sleep. If you guys want to check out Thirdsy, and I
for success.
cannot recommend it highly enough, Thirdsy.com, use the code TEF, and you will save 20%. By the way, melatonin free, which is great because there aren't a lot of products out there that are geared towards helping with sleep that don't have melatonin because
non-habit forming, Dewey,
will mess with your hormones and it can be habit forming. So none of that stuff in there, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Good stuff.
That's right, and you can get the travel packs if you're going on the road. Those are a godsend. But Thirdsy.com, and the code is TEF to save 20%, or you can scan the QR code on your screen right down there. There it is. Just scan it. Takes you right to the website TEF, and you'll save 20%. Let's bring in our good friend who has impeccable fashion and music taste. Competition Director Adrian Bozman. We are both representing our Zigzag shirts.
Man, Zigzags. I mean, maybe we should just talk about Zigzags. That's what the people really want to hear about, right?
I think it is. Well, if I have to, I've been lucky enough to have turned me on to a couple of like bands, two of which, or the two are King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, because their last album, it's fantastic. And then Zigzags. So those are the two that I have to credit you for. So anytime that we interview, I try to put this shirt on as sort of an homage to your musical taste.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, I appreciate it. And I think probably questionable to many, but it's nice. It's nice when there's one or two people out there that appreciate. So yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks.
Well, we were just talking before we came on here, you are just head down, really focused on what's going to be taking place in Fort Worth here in a couple of weeks. And you are primarily focused on the teams. So how was that decision made that you would be taking the lead there and Dave would sort of be taking the lead on the individuals?
Yeah, sort of. So kind of two things in that. Number one, yes, in terms of programming. So Dave is, heading up indies in terms of programming. I'm heading up teams. But as far as like my responsibilities to make sure that we have plans on how to run these events and, the judges that we need and all of the things that integrate into the competition to actually run it, I'm still very much in charge of those on both sides of the house. So, I think it's easy for the public to look at, these large competitions and look at one aspect of it. It's like, oh yeah, it's programming. Well, yeah, that's the most forward facing element of it, but there's a ton of other elements and planning that goes into making sure that a competition is run smoothly. And so I'm very much involved in that. But as far as programming is concerned, yes, teams and how it came about, Dave being back this year, it came back kind of midstream right before last year's games. I had programmed most of that. And we were, 11th hour. And so we did do some changing of last year's events with Dave's input, but largely it was already set. You know what I mean? So we did temper it somewhat with his review and input. This year he started running with it. I had done majority of the open, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, age group semis. We worked, hand in glove with those guys. And he started running with it. And he texted me and said, look, I'm really in the process here. I am like super fired up to do it. I want to take indies. And it's like, yeah, of course, go for it. I think that you're going to get a better outcome anytime you have somebody who's like genuinely enthusiastic to do it and is actively pushing aside kind of outside influence because they are so invested in it at that time. it's like, yeah, great, run with it. Let me know when you're ready. I'll be happy to give my feedback and see what we can do to make it as good as we can.
Yeah.
And then I guess focusing on the team programming, uh, I don't know how your own personal process operates, but is it like a completely different hat for you to basically be like, I gotta reshift everything now to focus on the teams? Because at the highest level at the games, it's a little bit different beast.
Sort of. I mean, again, it's not that I've had any lack of experience programming for the teams. Like I've done the teams the last couple of years at the games, done teams in various stages along the way, semifinals and quarterfinals, you know what I mean? So it's not that it's a foreign entity to me, but you're right, it does have its own sense of challenge. And I will say this year that what kind of emerged, and you guys will see this as more and more elements are announced, is that the teams are going to follow pretty closely to some of the events that the indies get to do. Not all the time, but there is going to be a pretty strong element of that. And for me personally, I think that there's a time and a place that works really well. We've experimented with that over the past, and I think the first year of quarterfinals, each division had a pretty similar programming set, and it was not well received. You know what I mean? And that's something we learned from. We're like, hey, let's not do that again. But there was also separation there where you had the same athletes doing the same things over and over again. Like, I totally get it. Not a great expression. However, when you're at the games and you have some of these like incredible set pieces that you can only have at the games, and these kind of one-off elements that you don't get to do anywhere else, it's like, why wouldn't you try to get the teams involved in some of those aspects as well? Obviously modified to make sense for a 4-person event versus an individual event. But yeah, that's going to be something that I think people pick up on pretty quickly, is that, hey, there's going to be a lot of crossover between what some of the individual events are and how they get experienced, and how the teams get to play as well.
How do you and Dave make each other better at programming?
Oh man, we're not afraid to push back hard
Yeah.
on each other. That's one of my favorite things about Dave and I's relationship. And we're lucky in the sense that, maybe it's not lucky because it's been so long, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
We've been working together since 2006 or 7. And in that, we've had some times where we see eye to eye on everything. We've had some times in there where we don't see eye to eye on much. You know what I mean? And at this point in our relationship, man, we are very comfortable shooting each other very straight. And so when something appears like it's just not going to work, or there's an obvious hole in it, or whatever the case may be, it's like from either end, we are very comfortable being like, hey, this approach might be a little bit better, or maybe this is something that you hadn't thought about, etc. Or on the other end, like, I think we're both pretty comfortable doubling down when we have an idea that we're like, no, man, I hear your feedback on this, but I think we got to run it through. I want to put the flag down. This is what I want to do with it. And I'm confident that even you might not see it, but I want to do it this way. And we're comfortable with each other enough that in those scenarios, it's like, okay, you let it go. So I don't know. It's a fun relationship to be able to be that honest with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and maybe digging into that a little bit, is there certain areas, if you had to characterize, where I don't want to say blind spots, but where that willingness to call each other out usually takes shape? Like, for example, like if me and Sean were programming, I'd probably be throwing a little bit more gymnastics and running into the mix than he would. We might be seeing a little more machine work, maybe some wall balls and moderate barbell stuff.
Yeah, I think less obviously than you would think.
Really?
Yeah. It's funny. The time that I got to spend in the driver's seat, I think people want to pigeonhole me particularly as having a certain flavor or style where it's, it's all just circus tricks and whatever else. Yeah, okay, that might be true for one or two of the events that you see that are really high profile, but I mean, there's a huge track record in there of online events, open events, quarterfinals events, online semis events that are very classic CrossFit.
Yeah.
And so, like, looking at it through that lens, there's less obvious kind of traits that I think either one of us has. Um, what I will say, I think Dave, he can favor like the grunt work a little bit more than I might. You know what I mean? And yeah, I think that I can push the skills further than he might. But within that, I think I think people would be surprised at some of the ideas that either of us has for one another that are from those domains that you would expect from the opposite person, if that makes sense. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm not putting that out there in a way that's easy for people to pick up on, but at any rate.
Yeah, I mean,
What
it would make for a great like docuseries or something
Yeah,
like
for
that if
sure.
you
That's
could
awesome.
allude to that, you know?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Or it might be more boring than people think.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, it's just a normal working relationship, and these guys like have crafted this for a long time, and it's just doing the work. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Not
Yeah.
everything is that compelling,
Team
but that's
program.
not for me to decide either, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
who's to say what people find interesting?
Well, team programming and team events, I think they just present there's such unique challenges, obviously, because this the amount of people you have on the floor and keeping track of everything. What have you learned about the things that have got to be included in a team event, just from a general perspective, to make it not only a good test, but also one that's watchable for fans?
Oh, I think you said it right there. The hardest part about teams is trying to make it approachable for the layperson or somebody who's not like directly involved with the team on the floor. Team events can be chaotic. I think we've all seen it. You know what I mean? Where you're watching something, you're like, man, it looks hard, but I don't really know what's going on and I don't know who's winning.
Right.
And so that is a big challenge with team events, is trying to make a story out of each heat and to try to make it presentable. So that's always something that we're trying to refine and make that better. As far as like must haves, I'm a big believer that you have to have two elements in a team competition. Maybe not in perfect balance, but you have to have some elements where the team gets to decide, meaning, okay, the three of us are on a team, we're presented with a workout or an event, and it's up to us to maximize the strengths within our team and strategize around that. I think that's one aspect that needs to be there at least some of the time. But the opposite is also true. I think there also needs to be times where the team does not get a choice, and it's like, oh man, we're going to be radically exposed because we just don't have the option to hide our weak link on this event, and we're going to get punished for that. So I think it's finding that balance of both of those elements. At what point does the team get to decide and maximize, and at what point does the team just get funneled into a non-choice and they have to run with what they got?
Yeah, I love that. And then taking into account venue, right? Because we're starting with a clean slate again, first year in Fort Worth, and um, one of the things that I think has made the programming at the games so distinct is the ability to lean on themes of the surrounding area, as well as taking part of, like, we all think back to the Capitol and going down and leveraging those things. Where would you say the balance point is for is, and how much you want to incorporate that on any given year? Is, like, are we going to stick to an 80-20 rule, or is there anything of like, hey, we gotta hammer something like this early to set the tone? Because we've already seen the Happy Star announced, and that has its own Texas flair. And I was just curious where that is.
Great question. Within that, I think there's a couple different avenues to explore. The first is that, yes, of course, you want to try to make a unique stamp on whatever location happens to be hosting the game. I think, yes, that's important. Now, whether or not that's, even within the top three decisions that you're going to make when you're crafting the event, I don't know. I think those are more kind of opportunities that come about organically as you come up with the best overall experience and test. Certain things start to emerge that you're like, oh, this would be a really cool thing to add on top now that we have a better understanding of the big picture. And I think it's easy to forget too. People have this recency bias where they're like, oh yeah, we utilized the city of Madison so well. It's like, yeah, we did. They had some really awesome lakes and some cool opportunities to get out of the Alliant Energy Center. But you take something as iconic as the Capitol. I mean, that didn't happen until the fifth year that we were there. Technically the sixth, because we had the year off for COVID, or at least the year at the ranch for COVID. So, it's not like these things just happen immediately. And I don't think that you have to, use that as like a primary decision maker. But yeah, I think it's great when you can capitalize on what you have there.
And do you feel did you guys feel handcuffed at all by the fact that the weather does pose a considerable obstacle to multiple outside events?
No, in short, no, because there's always ways to work around it when you are faced with constraints. There's no utopia,
Yeah.
put it that way. Regardless of venue, regardless of location, you're going to have constraints that you have to problem solve around. Texas being no different, Madison being no different. I mean, some of the extreme weather that would roll into Madison every year. The first event we were there. Oh,
Yeah, I was just about
downpour.
to say.
Mhm.
Wow, there you go. So
Yep.
it's one of those things where there's always going to be something that constrains you. And so if you view it as, yeah, we're limited by that, I think that's a little bit strange because there's always going to be those types of things. But if you view it as, okay, we know this challenge, we accept it for what it is, how can we work through it in a way that still expresses what we need to at the end of the day? You can get to some pretty cool endpoints. And yeah, I think everybody's going to see that as we go through Texas. I don't know if you guys have heard, but they tell me it's hot in Texas in the summer. I wasn't aware of that until like
No.
a couple days ago.
Thanks,
It's just
Internet.
yeah, we totally missed it somehow. But glib answers aside, it's like, yeah, when you understand the constraints you're working with, you can problem solve around them, and you can come up in many cases, those constraints lead to creativity that's like, oh, cool, we wouldn't have thought to do it that way unless we had to. So
Yeah.
sometimes it can be a hidden benefit.
Yeah.
There's some competitions out there that are messing with the team format, like the Wadapalooza, Tier Wadapalooza SoCal that's coming up here in a couple months. With we have 6 people, we're gonna have 3-on-3 and 2-on-2, and would that ever be something that would be appealing to try at the games level? And if so, why or why not?
I think the short answer is that teams have gone through a lot of changes over the years in terms of rule set, who's eligible, how many members of the team. Again, old school fans will remember. To me, it doesn't seem like that long ago. We had the 6-man teams or 6-person teams. So I can see that the format of the team competition changing. I no plans to do that in the short term, but yes, I don't see why we would be locked into a 4-person team forever. That doesn't seem realistic.
Hmm.
And I'm not trying to like allude to anything that we have plans
Right.
for in the immediate future, but yeah, I think that there's a high probability that we'll continue to experiment with the best format for that competition.
Mhm.
What do you think of the shortcomings of the team division?
I think you nailed it already. That's difficult to follow. Not just when you're looking at an event, there's lots of events that are great tests of fitness, but they are not great to watch.
Yeah.
That's true for the individuals and the teams. The challenge to make that a compelling spectator event on top of a legitimate test of fitness, that is compounded when you've got a bunch of people on the floor at once. And then if you take that and you zoom out a little bit, it can also be difficult to follow the team because you have so much roster change up from year to year. So you have now some of these entrenched kind of like perennial team favorites, but from year to year, they're radically different rosters.
Mhm.
And so, I don't know that CrossFit teams are established enough that they have that kind of presence like a major sports team might, that can anchor you to it despite the fact that your favorite player got traded out or something. I don't know that we're there yet.
Yeah.
There may come a time where we are, but I don't know that we're there yet.
When-
And as such, from year to year, man, you can have a completely different roster from a team, which makes it, as a fan, a little bit more difficult to follow, because are you following that collection of individuals and where they happen to end up, or is it the legacy of that team that you're interested in? Maybe it's a bit of both. With the sport still being small as it is, it can be difficult to track those people through all of that, and you compound that across 7 different competition regions across the world, all the different teams that are involved on the local level. It can be a challenge to follow it. So I think that's the big one. Just followability, if that's a word, both
Mm.
on the event side itself and then through the season.
I'm always really interested about just someone's creative process and how you go from, okay, I've got to program X amount of events for this competition. Where do you start with that blank slate? And then what is sort of the process that you go through to get you to the finished product? Because I think there's some people out there that still don't understand, everything all the steps that go into programming this event. Because it's not like you guys throw something up on a whiteboard and you go, all right, there it is, next.
Yeah. Well, there's a reality, right? Like there is definitely that part of it where you are just throwing ideas on a whiteboard and you're like, ooh, I like this as an event. Cool. And then, a couple weeks later, you have a better picture of the rest of the events. And that one that you really liked, maybe it doesn't fit,
Mhm.
Or maybe you start looking at the schedule on a whole and the equipment transition is an impossibility to try to fit it in where you originally had planned it. So you got to reshuffle and maybe you got to insert it later in the competition than you originally planned or something like that. Um, so there's a lot of moving pieces that happen after you've got those original concepts on paper. And a lot of that just has to be worked out as you go through it over and over again with the team. I mean, I was talking to my team today and, the big picture is already done. There's, very little that is left to be completed as it should be, right? Like we're a week and a half out. It should be pretty complete. However, there's a ton of things that we can still continue to refine by going through the run of show again. And you take a day or two off from looking at it and you come back, you look at it again, something jumps out at you. It's like, oh, we could make that better, or this transition could be easier this way. Or it's more intuitive to see it, here instead of here, or whatever. And so those little pieces, I think, end up taking a lot of time as we get closer to the finish.
Speaking to one of those little pieces that you just mentioned, the equipment changing. I mean, that's something that I
Yeah.
think a lot of people don't even factor into it. And I want to hear your perspective on how much of a factor that is in being a cog in this kind of like well-oiled machine.
Yeah, it's huge. And shout out to the equipment teams and all the volunteer teams that come out every year. Literally could not do these events without the passion of those people behind it. And so anytime that I'm feeling cynical about CrossFit or, attitudes online or, whatever, just the general state of the world, I think about just the power of the people that show up, give their time for these events, believe in it enough that year over year, they're willing to come back and sweat it out with us. All for what? So that the show looks awesome and that people get to watch it from the comfort of their own home and hopefully get inspired enough to, go to their local affiliate or join up with a couple of buddies and try to get a little bit fitter, So there's a lot of power in that. I got a little off track talking about the volunteers, but it all kind of stems from these little pieces that go into making the show before and after the athletes are on the field of play. And they're huge, like each one of those small little puzzle pieces adds up to the totality of the event. And that to me is what makes the game so special. You know what I mean? Like I get it. Like there's always criticism every year, nothing new to the games. I think that'll always be the case. With something as broad and dynamic as we're setting out to do, there will always be a strong opinion about what we should have done and how we could have done it better. And great. And you know what? Yeah, there's lots of lessons that we've learned along the way and things that we have, tried to improve year over year. That being said, I think that pulling off something that is, there's a template for it, but it's unique every year. There's something to be said about that, and something to be said for the mindset of the people that want to engage in that, both as an athlete and they pursue that headlong and say, hey, yeah, I'm up to the challenge where I don't really know what the final event's going to be, but like throw me in there. That's awesome,
Yeah.
And same from the community aspect of that, where it's like, hey, yeah, I'm somebody who's going to take time off work and away from my family to come and like, I don't know the length of day. Like they, those volunteers that are coming out, they don't know the length of the competition days. They don't know the schedule yet. They're just showing up to be there and to be adaptable. And I mean, I think it's so cool. So
Yeah.
again, rambly answer,
No.
but hopefully that illustrates just, the respect I've got for a lot of these people, because it's such a selfless thing to come out and be a part of, so it's very cool.
Yeah, no doubt.
You mentioned lessons learned. What lessons have you learned over
Oh
these
man.
years about what you need to do to be the best that you can possibly be at programming these events?
Simplify, I think is the big one that I would come back to. It's easy to have like a really cool idea or something that you think is unique and then get locked into that and think that you have to do it that way, even after you've pitched it to other people and they're like, yeah, I don't really get it. You know what I mean? It's important to come back and strip things down to their essence as much as you can, because that clarity has to come through. You get one shot at it, right? And again, we talk about the uniqueness of this event. It's unlikely that the set of events that we're doing at this year's games are going to show up anywhere else in competition, maybe ever again. You know, maybe one or two of them, they're like they come off well enough that you're like, okay, that's something we got to come back to in a year or two. Cool. But for the most part, none of these are ever going to be done again, right? And so that being said, for somebody who's watching at home, watching from the stands, paid a lot of money to be there as a spectator, they have to get it right away. There's only one shot for that. And so if it's something that's like, no, 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 trust me, after you sit through your 10th baseball game, you're going to get it. It's like, you don't have that time. You know what I mean? Like they get one event to be able to see, oh, I see this guy's winning and I understand why he's such a badass for winning, you know, and that's only going to come through if it's like a simple execution of something really raw. So
take it or leave it. When you said that, I immediately think of what's just been announced so far on Farrington Field, the Friday night light
Dude.
stuff. It just seems like it's going to be an ESPN window, and so far what we have gotten seems fairly straightforward. Blink twice on your right eye if I'm onto something here, but but other than that, touching on that little, I guess maybe even just a little bit of a theme. It seems like after the fact, and usually we have a chance to chat with you or Dave or someone like that, and some themes do arise. You think about a year in particular, you're like, yeah, this kind of painted some of my thinking, or the program in general. Is there anything that stands out to you as like an early theme of, you know, whether it's the environment or the venue or the year or whatever it may be that kind of pokes its head out?
I mean, as much as I can reveal at this point, I think I would agree. I think there's a theme of simplicity and just kind of keeping things really straight up in a lot of ways. You know, there'll be some twists and turns. It's the games, you know, there always has to be, but yeah, it's going to be pretty straight up in a lot of ways. And I think that's pretty fun. You know, I have to laugh sometimes. I'm very much like, hey, let people decide. And, you know, I don't want to dictate what Sean thinks is cool or what Tommy thinks is, you know, lame or whatever. But I do have to laugh when you get some criticisms around like, oh, people doing a foot race, how boring. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's been one of the most compelling events in human history. You know, maybe not that distance specifically, but it's like, dude, since people have been alive, it's like three things that make them really, really interested in competition with one another. It's foot racing each other, fighting each other, and throwing things. Like that's it. That's existed since we've been upright. You know what I mean? So anyway, whatever.
I mean, the first Olympic event technically was a foot race, basically the marathon,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, I can't wait for Farrington. I think it's going to be absolutely nuts. And like, yeah, I think it's going to be, in retrospect, like you guys come back to this interview and maybe I'm way off base, but I don't think I am. I think in retrospect, people are going to, after seeing those races and the drama that is going to unfold, I'm very confident in that. I think people are going to come back and be like, dude, that was a spectacle.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'll give you
even
credit.
and I think it'll be one of those things too. Another illustration where it's easy to take a look at something on paper and be like, boring, next. You know, but then when you see the athletes apply themselves to it, you see the drama of the races unfold, you see where we're at in the competition and the point spread and, you know, who's going to be at risk the next morning of getting cut and stuff like that. Like, it's a very different environment when you start getting into the competition and you're out of this abstract world of just what it looks like on paper. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'll give you credit for just that, because I remember a couple of years ago when you were talking to us about the sandbag clean event, and you're like, in a vacuum, this may not look like much, but when you add the competitive fire and what's going to happen on the competition floor, like time and time again on testing, like this is what a lot of people came back to. And I remember I was on the floor looking at it and I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And then as soon as
I
athletes
was doing
start,
the same thing, Tommy.
and it was like a perfect slow burn, right? Like once it started to whittle out, as soon as athletes had to like give like almost like a second hitch in, you're like, oh, they're in for it, because I see the bags that are still out there, and then it just became one of like I mean one of the more awesome events I can remember watching live, and it didn't start out that way, it didn't look that way on the outside, but the effort and the simplicity of it ultimately to you gave it some juice. That and your little bring it out,
Yeah.
the old bring it out.
Well, hey, talk about best laid plans. I mean, that's a great example of how, hey, like we ran through that a bunch. We had some of the strongest athletes in the field tested that year and couldn't get past the 340 under like relatively fresh conditions. You know what I mean? And so to have that kind of WWE moment where we pulled bring it out,
Yep.
I
it was
mean,
pretty great.
if it, I mean, it probably would have drove people like nuts online, and people would have had, someone would have got canceled. But I feel like if you would have had them like labeled like Fat Man and Little Boy, like as the two nukes at the end at
Yeah.
the end that you got to get through, like I don't know, maybe that's me. I'm a history guy.
It's always next year.
Yep. There you go.
Boz, if people are on the fence, but I don't know if I want to watch a team competition, I think I want to focus on the individuals. What would you say to that person to be like, no, you're going to want to tune into this?
I think that the team dynamic is something that you don't see on the individuals, and it's worth watching. I think that's one of the most compelling things for me beyond the events is just the team psychology. And you can see it. It's so raw on the competition floor when you have a team that works well together. It's like there's this nonverbal communication that they're just all in sync. And then you also see that come out when you have a team that is so good and so I don't know, just in sync with each other, that when the chips are down, they lift each other up and they're able to recover. I think that's one of the most impressive things about the team comp, because there's always going to be moments where it doesn't go exactly as you planned, and how a team reacts to that, I think, is critical. You don't get that necessarily with the indie comp because it's just one person.
Right.
So that kind of, I don't know, teamsmanship is great. And I'll also say, hey, for just some of the TV factor, there's some great blowups on the team too. When the chips are down and things aren't happening well, and you get a team that just it's like clear that somebody's not holding their end, and there's some bad vibes going on. I mean, I don't want that for anybody out there, teams, but man, sometimes it's fun to watch.
It is.
Who doesn't love a teammate getting dragged like physically by like
Yeah.
their standard issue shirt and strap or whatever? But my I guess my last question pertains more to like the experience as a whole. I mean, it's not a trade secret that the team goes out for site visits, and checks out the venue at large. And I'm curious, any clue into what the experience from a spectator fan, just environment and vibe is going to be once we get to Fort Worth? Because there was very distinct differences between the ranch and Carson and Madison, and now we're going to a new arena in a new city.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Yes, it is going to be different. And so, those that were with us in Madison shouldn't expect a Madison experience in Fort Worth. It's going to be different. And one of the big differences is that we've got this huge free fan experience that is separate from the ticket holder experience. So ticket holders get the premium experience, right? They're going to have a ton of events that only they get access to, to watch from their seats in the stadium, which is going to be awesome. But if you're somebody in the Fort Worth area, or you want to come into the Fort Worth area, there's a whole free fan experience that's going on at the Will Rogers Auditorium just down the road. It's within walking distance of Dickies. And that's where the vendor village is going to be. That's where people are going to have all their different activations. There's going to be spectator workouts. There's going to be, seminars happening there from some of the CrossFit Level 1 staff and things like that. There's going to be workouts that you can do that are going to mimic some of the events that the athletes are going to have to do, which is cool. So there is a ton of free stuff for people to get involved with. And our hope is that we can use the games as a catalyst, not just for people that are already deep in this world, like we are. Like, this is something we look forward to every year. We already know what it's all about. We understand the power of it. But I can't tell you how many times I've been at the games with somebody who's there for the first time, and they're like, holy crap, I had no idea just how powerful this stuff is. Hopefully we can recreate that for somebody who doesn't know enough about the event, or wasn't able to get a ticket or whatever. They can come and feel that in this free experience. regardless of their, overall experience with CrossFit or whether or not they were able to get a ticket to the big dance.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm really excited about is seeing how that plays out.
Boz, thanks so much for taking the time, man. And we're really looking forward to seeing how it all does play out in Fort Worth and what you guys do with the new venue, and looking forward to hearing more details on events, so more debate can take place online. But
yeah, man, stay tuned. They're coming, and I can't believe that we're, I'll be traveling out a little over a week here, so it's all systems go.
All right. Well, best of luck, and thanks for all you're doing. And again, looking forward to seeing the finished product.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you.